김미경의 Reboot Challenge Day 56, page 247. At a time such as now, when everything changes drastically, you must be able to create the scenarios that have you, the most important constant, at their center. Only then can you find the right path to take. In the current situation, you must take the initiative to modify and change all the variables around you in order to keep the constant that is you. If it is hard to find what is best for you, you should try to find what is next best for you. When you pull yourself together in this way, you can live in the changing world as a meaningful being. Who knows? Perhaps this is the best time for you to reflect on yourself and find better dreams, ones that are more fitting for you. If there is one thing I have come to realize after living for more than 50 years, it is the fact that you cannot change anything just by blaming the circumstances of your life. There are two kinds of circumstances in life. One is fortune, and the other is misfortune. If fortune is about getting everything, then your wish for misfortune is about not getting what you want, no matter how you try. Now, however, when I look back at my life, I realize that none of the things that I have experienced had anything to do with fortune or misfortune. Whatever happened to me was all colorless, scentless, and neutral, and there was no inherent intention in it. It became either fortune or misfortune, depending on how I dealt with the situation at the time. The current situation becomes a little clearer when you treat coronavirus as a circumstance. How about perceiving the pandemic as a circumstance that may bring you fortune instead of definitively defining it as a misfortune? Who knows? Perhaps sometimes in the future you will be able to say, back then, coronavirus ruined all my plans. I thought it was a misfortune, but now I realize that it was a fortune because it gave me an opportunity to rid myself of all that was behind the times and start my business with a new approach. In fact, I also have to revise all the plans I had for 2021. I had plans to stay in the United States, Europe, and Vietnam for 3 months each to speak and take intensive English classes, but all these plans had to be scrapped. Can I call this situation a fortune or misfortune? Whenever I wonder about it, I tell myself, coronavirus is just a variable. Fortunately, both my company and I are in good shape so that's okay. I should just take a deep breath and do my best, doing what I can now. One thing is clear, just because things didn't go the way you'd planned doesn't mean it is misfortune. A real misfortune is when your road is blocked, your plans are foiled, and your dreams are crushed, and you fail to look for another path. For some people, coronavirus may seem to be a pause button that stops them from doing anything. But if you change the angle of your perspective slightly, it can be a new opportunity that lets you dream another dream. Instead of letting yourself a constant feel devastated by the coronavirus or variable, use your strengths, ones that you haven't used before, instead of despairing and doing nothing. As you go through difficult times, constantly remind yourself that you are the master of your life. I cannot imagine how hard it must be for you. The last word that touched me like a vaccine for my mind came from someone else that I knew. One day I called him and said, "It's hard because of coronavirus these days, isn't it? How are you dealing with it now that you've lost all your customers?" Then he told me, "It must be harder on you than me. I cannot imagine how hard it must be for you to provide paychecks for over 20 employees. I feel for you." His words of comfort made me chuckle. He was a fashion designer whom I had always admired, and he owned an offline fashion shop. I called him because I was concerned about him and his business, and I wanted to console him. But it was he who offered a word of comfort to console me instead. I could feel his deep consideration for me when he was telling me that the situation was harder on me than on him, even though I knew that his business had taken a hard hit. And that was the moment when I realized I was a heartwarming comfort sympathy could be. Afterward, I decided to follow his example. Even when somebody tells me, just out of courtesy, "It's hard these days, isn't it?" I always tell them, "It must be hard on you. I cannot imagine how hard it must be for you. Now that the entire society is going non-contact because of the virus, and even human relationships have come to a stop, isolation and loneliness are the emotions we feel most. In order to survive by keeping our distance from others, aren't we slowly losing the human relationships that are so dear to us?" Lately, I'm growing more and more concerned. It often breaks my heart to hear people spewing hurtful words of suspicion and criticism instead of words of sympathy and consideration. Corona is a highly contagious virus, and anybody could get infected at any time. You can get infected by unconsciously holding a handrail in the subway or pressing a button in an elevator. There is a possibility of infection anywhere we stay in office, restaurants, or parks. None of us can ever be sure of not catching the virus.